Aleatory fiction is fiction where the order of the telling is variable. That is to say, the narrative is broken into chunks, and the chunks themselves can be reordered in terms of the order in which you, the reader, encounter them. The order in which the audience consumes the chunk of narrative. This is different from telling a story out of order, where the timeline moves around, but the reader always starts at a certain place, encounters things in a certain order, and finishes at the same place. Rather, this is something where the way the reader actually encounters the different chunks of narrative is variable. Now, this is different from other things like tabular fiction that we've already talked about. Tabular fiction is where the narratives are presented essentially, or the narrative components are presented in parallel, independently of each other, orthogonally, where the reader must determine a path to navigate these different things with no preferred order. Here's an example of tabular fiction. This is from The Exaggerations of Peter Prince by Steve Katz, and the text actually runs in these columns. And this isn't a snaking column text like you would see in the newspaper. These different things run all the way down, page after page after page. And the reader has to figure out how to read them and comprehend them and make sense of them. That's different from something where the order in which they're presented. In the case of aleatory, it is going to be straightforward. You're going to start on one end and go to the other, but the pieces in there can actually be shuffled around. This is also different from A Garden of Forking Paths. So this is John Fowles' The French Lieutenant's Woman, and The French Lieutenant's Woman very famously has 3 endings. So you've got to decide how to deal with that. Do you pick one ending? Do they all exist? It's kind of Schrodinger's ending, right? But in this case, again, you read them in a specific order. First you encounter ending number 1, then you encounter ending number 2, then you encounter ending number 3. So there is no shuffling. There's no dynamic presentation of the endings. Now, aleatory fiction is a very different thing. In the case of aleatory fiction, you actually do get them in a different order depending on what happens. So let's start with probably, well, the best known version of this that's recognized as such, which is Hopscotch by Julio Cortazar. Julio Cortazar's postmodern masterwork. And Hopscotch has this thing at the front, has a little note that he calls Table of Instructions. And what the Table of Instructions does, I'll just read the top of it. It says, in its own way, this book consists of many books, but 2 books above all. The first can be read in a normal fashion, and it ends with chapter 56, at the close of which there are 3 garish little stars which stand for the words "the end." Consequently, the reader may ignore what follows with a clean conscience. The second should be read by beginning with chapter 73 and then following the sequence indicated at the end of each chapter. In case of confusion or forgetfulness, one need only consult the following list. And then he literally has a list of chapters. And the numbers here are crazy. I'll read the first few to you. 73, 1, 2, 116, 3, 84, 4, 71, 5, 81, 74, 6, 7, 8, 93, 68, 9, 104, etc. So they're all over the place, and they wouldn't even need to have been ordered that way, and yet they have been. And so this is Julio Cortazar presenting you with multiple ways to read and apprehend his book. Now, furthermore, up at the top, let's think about what the very first sentence of this is. In its own way, this book consists of many books, but 2 books above all. So that first phrase, in its own way, this book consists of many books, suggests to us that there are probably other ways we could order these chapters. And in fact, any possible set of permutations and ordering of the chapters would, in principle, be another book and another reading of this book. And as such, the number of books in here actually is infinite, right? And Cortazar is pointing us out to that. And so This is aleatory. The order in which you read this, either number 1 through 56, or this other crazy order he gives us, or something else, is going to give us a different reading experience. We will interpret the book differently, or at least we will apprehend it differently. And that is an example of aleatory fiction. And the reader is going to make this choice, and there's going to be a different experience based on what the reader chooses. Now, what else do we have along these lines? So, in his book of short stories, A Child Again, Rober Coover has a little envelope on the outside of the book. And in that envelope, I just pulled it out, there is a deck of cards. They go in the envelope. You pull these cards out, and we have, it's called Heartsuit. And as you can see, it's a deck of cards. One card is the first card, one card is the last card. All the other cards are to be shuffled. They all have words on them. They all have one of the cards of the Heartsuit in the corner. You shuffle these up. You put one before the first one before the Joker, the last one, and then you read them in that order. And based on the order that you read them in, the order they take, and there are many permutations, based on the order they take, you get a different story with different characters doing different things. And ultimately, the perpetrator, this is a crime story, if you will, ultimately the perpetrator of the crime will vary. The actual guilty party will vary based on the order in which these are dealt. So that's Heartsuit by Rober Coover. Another one that's well known and is frequently discussed is The Unfortunates by B.S. Johnson, which is very famously a novel in a box. It is a box. And when I open this box up, what I have inside is a set of pamphlets. And each of these individual pamphlets is essentially a chapter in the novel. The first one goes first. Here's one that says first. And then again, I shuffle them at random, put them together, read them, and that is the order in which I can read and understand the contents of The Unfortunates. There's even instructions here. It says, this novel has 27 sections, temporarily held together by a removable wrapper, which of course I have retained. Apart from the first and last sections, which are marked as such, the other 25 sections are intended to be read in random order, right? If readers prefer not to accept the random order in which they receive the novel, then they may rearrange the sections into any other random order before reading. So that is aleatory, right? And again, the experience you have, the way that you will apprehend what's in this novel and make sense of it, and the emotional experience you're going to get is going to vary based on what order those things come out of the shuffled deck, essentially. So these are all examples of this. Now, another great example that I do not own, so I can't show you, and I haven't had the good fortune to read, it's rare and it's expensive, is called Composition 1 by Mark Saporta. And Composition number 1 is similar to The Unfortunates, but it's a stack of loose leaf pages. And you're supposed to take the loose leaf pages out of the box, shuffle them up, and read them in that order. So it's a similar concept as The Unfortunates, but it's individual pages instead. Now, interestingly, we've also seen some examples of this in the video format. And the first one that sprang to mind for me was there was a made-for-Netflix one-season television show called Kaleidoscope. And Kaleidoscope, instead of having episode numbers, it was colors. So it was yellow, green, red, purple, etc. And one of them was the first episode, and then one of them was the last episode, and those were fixed. But other than that, different Netflix accounts got these presented in a different order. And if you just watch the next episode in the order they were presented, or if you start in the beginning and let it run through, I would have a different experience from another Netflix subscriber. Now, of course, I could also choose the order I wanted to watch them in, or I could watch them in the order they gave me, but in either case, I would have a different experience. I would learn things at a different time. It would be built in different ways. The story would be built. I might be seeing, further down the line actions without understanding how we got here. Or I might see how we got here first and then see those with those knowledge. So maybe I'm starting in Medeus, maybe I'm not. All of that was a different experience for every watcher depending on how they did it, which I thought was a really cool, interesting concept for Netflix, and a very, again, taking aleatory fiction and moving it into the single season television format. Now, there's actually another example, I think, in the single season television format, and this one was accidental, but it essentially turned out to be aleatory fiction. So I'm talking about The Prisoner, the enigmatic British TV show starring Pat McEwen. And The Prisoner, which was enigmatic and allegorical and, very interesting, mind-stimulating viewing, was ultimately aired out of order the first time it was aired on British television. It was shot and aired, and for some reason, the episodes were aired in the wrong order. And this presented continuity problems. There were characters that suddenly regressed. There were developments that occurred that later in the season appeared not to have occurred. And that presented a bit of a challenge. And then when The Prisoner was released, I think originally on VHS, probably, in video format, the episodes were released in a different order than they were released on the television show. And so especially with a show like The Prisoner, which is so heady anyway, and really inviting kind of analysis and thought, the fact that these things were out of order became very stimulating of conversation with a certain set of aficionados. I think this was further complicated by the fact that it wasn't really clear how to put them in the right order, and I personally think that putting them in the right order is fundamentally problematic. Like, you can't really order these episodes in a way where you don't have some kind of problem or some kind of weakness. So it's almost like they were built not really to be able to go into a single canonical order. And the consequence of that is that Prisoner aficionados basically made their own orders. And you can go online and you can search, and people will tell you they've got various orders that you should watch the episodes in and why, right? And the first episode is unambiguous, and the last two episodes are unambiguous. They have to be where they are. But everything else, people move them around. And they curate different orders for different experiences. Similarly with Kaleidoscope, if we go back to Kaleidoscope, there's a whole kind of subculture of people curating their order for watching Kaleidoscope. Watch Kaleidoscope in this order, and here's why. Right? So in that sense, it's very similar to Prisoner, to the point where I wonder if The Prisoner may have been one of the inspirations for the team that put together Kaleidoscope. Now, there's another accidental example of aleatory narrative, this one from film. And this is something that we've all heard of, and quite possibly everybody who's watching this video has seen, and probably seen many times. And that is Star Wars. And in particular, I'm talking about the 9-film arc that is the core arc. And this, of course, is because they were made out of order. And this was just due to pragmatics, right? George Lucas started with episode 4. It even said episode 4 right at the beginning of the movie, right? So we had episodes 4, 5, 6. And then we went back and we had episodes 1, 2, 3. And then we had 7, 8, 9. So now you're presented with a choice. If you were to sit fresh and watch the entire 9-movie core Star Wars franchise, getting rid of all the side stuff, you would have two obvious choices. One would be watch them in the order in which they were made and released. The other would be watch them in the order of their numbering, the chronological order in which the events occur. And I put it to you that you're going to have a different experience with the Star Wars franchise depending on which way you choose to consume those 9 films. That is an aleatory narrative. Now, let's go back to print again. And in particular, I want to talk now about graphic novels, and not just any graphic novels, but the big kahuna of all graphic novels. This is Building Stories by Chris Ware. And Chris Ware is a very smart, interesting writer-illustrator who works in the graphic novel format. But what Chris Ware gives us in Building Stories, if I can open this box up. This is a book in a box. When I open this box up, there are a whole bunch of graphic novels inside. And some of them are small and slim. This one just folds out in panels. Some of them work like a book. Smaller things, different form factors. Some of them get quite big. This one's hardbound. This one's hardbound and it's even bigger. Right? This one is paper. Different things, different form factors. I have one that opens up here like a newspaper. And it unfolds. And in the bottom of the whole thing, I even have a board game. More underneath. Big ones that fold out really big, etc., etc. I have mine arranged kind of by descending order of size because it seems to me like the best way to store it. But all of these things, these, I don't know how many it is, 15-ish components that sit in this box are just in the box. And there is no guide for the order in which to read them. So as I'm trying to understand and learn the story that's being given to me in this Chris Ware novel, graphic novel in a box, I have to make my own choices for how to pick them up and consume them. Am I going to sit and look at this game board thing first? Am I going to read the big ones, the big newspaper size ones first? Am I going to read the kind of the thick, substantial hardbound volumes? Will I do one of these, not all one of these? Will I start one of these and move back? Am I going to look at the game board and then read some things, look back at the game board? The choice that I make about how I pick up and consume all of the different components of this cause me to have a different experience with it. And in fact, however many components there are in this, and I bet you the box tells me, 14 components, there's actually one more. Because the back of the box itself is part of the story. And part of what Chris Ware does is he gives us a diagram of a house and he tells us where, he makes suggestions for where to store the individual components of this box in our personal home. Now, I'm not doing that, of course. I'm keeping them all together in the box. But again, the way that you as a reader apprehend and digest and make sense of this is going to be different based on how you choose to tackle the different components of building stories. That is aleatory fiction. If you can think of some more examples of this, I would love to hear them. Put them in the comments. Tell me about your examples of aleatory fiction or what you think of these examples I gave you, and I look forward to seeing you next time.